the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
The trip to the airport these days leaves Americans with embarrassing choices. Law-abiding citizens can bear it all through a peekaboo body scanner, or they can get groped in a pat-down search by a federal employee. Now that's a real choice. There is no evidence these new body scanners make us more secure. But there is evidence that former Homeland Security Chief Michael Chernoff made money hawking these full body scanners. The underwear bomber tried to blow up a plane over Detroit last Christmas. Shortly thereafter, Chernoff went on a media tour promoting the full body scanners. This former Homeland Security chief told everyone we had to have the body scanners at airports to be safe. Too bad he didn't disclose he was getting paid to sell these intrusive devices. Isn't that lovely? Meanwhile, the populace is giving up more rights in the name of alleged security. These body scanners are a violation of the Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches and seizures. There must be a better way to have security at airports than taking pornographic photographs of our citizens, including children, and then giving apparent kickbacks to political hacks. And that's just the way it is.
For what reason does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
I'd like to speak to the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, in just a few weeks, the Obama tax hike time bomb, otherwise known as the expiration of the current tax cuts, will explode, resulting in the highest single tax increase in U.S. history. For some, it is tempting to accept the argument that increasing taxes on upper incomes and small businesses will solve our deficit problems. However, any clear thinking that confiscating more money from Americans through taxes to feed a rapidly growing government will only lead to a continued death spiral of increased taxes and expanding government. Ultimately, we will have a shrinking private sector and fewer jobs. Mr. Speaker, on November 2nd, the American people spoke loudly, and they said that we are in a desperate need of reform in the way the government does its business. To that end, let me suggest that instead of making tax cuts temporary and spending permanent, that we make tax cuts permanent and spending temporary. It is time for Congress and the President to put the American people first and extend permanently all of the current tax cuts for families and small businesses in order to make this economy sound. I yield back.
For what reason does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute, revised.
Without objection, the gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In May, 154 of my Republican colleagues and I sent a letter to the President's Fiscal Commission asking them to reject a new value-added tax as a way to balance the federal budget. With top White House advisors like John Podesta and Paul Volcker talking about the need for a VAT tax, there was a great concern that the Fiscal Commission would look to this tax as an easy way to raise more revenue. Last week, I was pleased to see that the co-chairs released a preliminary report that did not call for a new VAT tax. The ease with which a VAT tax can raise revenue makes it especially dangerous. The government cannot create jobs, and a VAT tax would only further deplete resources from the private sector, the true center of job growth. Now we need to have a serious debate in Congress about the best way to control government spending and let the private sector flourish and grow and create private sector sustainable jobs. I yield back.
For what reason does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the top priority of Congress for this lame duck session should be extending the tax cuts for all Americans in order to create jobs and get people back to work. Once this important matter is completed, I strongly encourage Congress to consider ways to protect the privacy of airline passengers while keeping air travel safe and secure. Air travelers across America have come to expect a certain level of discomfort and anxiety when they fly. And for the most part, these American travelers are good sports and team players in the name of tight security. Recently, though, the patience and privacy of these travelers has been tested at a whole new level with full-body scans. These intrusive scans are one such screening method that Congress should examine this year. I support the Aircraft Passenger Whole Body Imaging Limitations Act, authored by Congressman Jason Chaffetz of Utah, to make sure the images lifted from scanners are not stored, transferred, or shared. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
For what reason does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute. Advise and extend my remarks, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago today, the American people registered a historic rejection of American liberalism and the agenda of this administration and this Congress. The American people said in deafening terms that they're tired of the borrowing and the spending and the bailouts and the takeovers and the tax increases of the recent past. They voted for change. That's why it's so remarkable, Mr. Speaker, that this Congress is poised to allow one of the largest tax increases in American history to take effect in January of this year. A historic $3.9 trillion tax increase could take effect, impacting every American if Congress fails to act. The average tax increase will be more than $1,500 per household. American families will see the marriage penalty reinstated, the child tax credit cut in half, tax rates on investments and savings and inheritance will all increase. It's absolutely imperative, if Congress accomplishes nothing else in this lame duck, that we take immediate action to make permanent all the current tax rates. And let's be clear, this is not a debate over tax cuts. If the tax rates are not preserved permanently, it will result in one of the largest tax increases in history.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting legislation we'll introduce today to make those rates permanent.
I ask all members to adhere to the